We're back with the 2025 NFL Draft. We're revisiting the second half of the first round and the teams and their drafts. So we aren't looking at 16 teams this time like the first part. We're looking at 14 teams. 25 and 26 were Jackson Dart and James Pierce Jr., which we talked about in part one because, as you know, we're not just going through the first round picks. We're going through the drafts as a whole. It's very hard to do that in a full 20 to 30 minute video, but we're going to try to get it done fast so we can do justice to these drafts. Again, if I went to in-depth, it'd be hours long. But today we're going to talk about that, examine. So, this is Son of a Sports. Let's revisit the 2025 NFL Draft in part 2. We start at pick 17 with the Cincinnati Bengals, and Gig'em, Shemar Stewart, was their pick. I think with Shemar, it was, you're trying to get young, raw talent in the building, but I didn't understand the pick in terms of where Cincinnati was trying to be. Cincinnati has an offense worthy of a real playoff run, and they're trying to get their defense to that point. Their defense is one of the worst in the NFL, and at one point this season was on pace to be one of the worst in NFL history. It has not improved over the last 2 years. They have lost players. They're going to probably lose Trey Hendrickson this offseason, and they needed to get someone in the building that would be a win-now guy. Shemar Stewart is a developmental piece, someone that I would have preferred to go to a team in the second round as his pass rush game grows and teams lean into his athleticism. What on paper he was supposed to at least be as a rookie was a good run defender, and he was not. He struggled mightily in 8 games, dealt with injuries throughout the entire year, and it limited his 2025 campaign very much so. It is going to take a lot for him to salvage anything into being a quality NFL player. And they went with a younger, more athletic raw talent in the first round. And then in the second round, went with an older, more experienced linebacker and 25-year-old Demetrius Knight. They got Barrett Carter in the fourth round. And I think both struggled pretty well throughout the early parts of the year. Took some time. They both finished with 106 tackles each. It's such a weird approach from a team that I don't know if they know what they're doing front office-wise. They went with young and raw in this first round, older and mostly polished in the second round. And Dylan Fairchild, I think, was a really good piece for their offensive line and can really help stabilize it going forward. But this draft, I'm not the most confident in, and I need to see more in year 2 from Shemar Stewart for me to be more fine with that pick. The Seahawks, who I've already made 2 videos about, I've made it clear. I loved this draft from them. Seahawks fans banged the table for Grey Zabel, who was coming out of college as a tackle and had the skills to be a really, really good interior offensive lineman. And in year 1, you saw the progression. Everything you see of the guy, he is obsessed with the sport, wants to get better, and you saw him get better. He struggled the few games that his old college teammate Josh Sandell was out, the center for the Seahawks. But, I mean, before then and after then, he really did look good and grew throughout the season. Nick Emmanwori in round 2 was the perfect fit for Seattle, and I think they were the perfect fit for him. He immediately came in and was a real nickel for this team. Really allowed them to get creative with their defense. If you want to watch my explanation on that, go watch that video. I did it a few days ago. It was one of my most, I'd say, favorite videos I've ever done. Elijah Oro, kind of questioned the pick in the end of the second round. I liked the player, but at 50, I thought it was interesting, their usage with him in year 1. I need to see more going forward, but I still kind of like the fit with what Seattle's doing. Got to get heavier on that offensive line. Jalen Milroe, someone you're just hoping develops over time. Riley Mills only played 4 games, came in the Super Bowl and got a sack. There's a reason why someone banged the table for him in that building. Torrey Horton, I know he barely played, only played 8 games. They traded for Rashid Shaheed to play his role better, but he had 5 touchdowns with only 13 receptions. The guy's explosive. He's really athletic and really blew me away in year 1 in the short time he played. I like this draft class. I think it gave them immediately what they needed, and they're all young enough that they give them something real in the long term. Congratulations, Seattle. Tampa at 19 took Emeka Egbuka, and I think a lot of people realize and have seen the season he had. Right away, people were comparing him to Randy Moss with how explosive he was at the beginning of the year, how polished he looked, and then the end of the year really showed some concerns. I think you're going to get a mixed bag with him no matter what, and always his ceiling felt like it was going to be more of a wide receiver 2 than a pure wide receiver 1, which I think is okay. Emeka Egbuka still has a ton of talent, and there's still room to grow for the guy. Yeah, he's a little bit of an older receiver coming out, 22 years old, had that up and down season he had as a rookie, but still ended with 938 yards and 6 touchdowns. It's not the end of the world for a guy that struggled when his entire team struggled. Quarterback had injuries, the defense started declining. It was a weird season in Tampa. Even then, I think there's still room for a possible wide receiver 1 growth. I think his real ceiling is like an amazing wide receiver 2. The rest of the board, Benjamin Morrison showed some flashes in 10 games in year 1. Still want to see more and still want to see him fully be what we thought he could be before his injury in his last year at Notre Dame. Jacob Parrish was really good for Tampa in year 1. Allowed them to get creative with him in the nickel. He had to move the boundary, and I still think he had some real flashes there. There's so much potential with Parrish that I really like what he can do going forward. Tez Johnson even had some flashes in year 1. 5 touchdowns, 322 yards. From a 7th round pick, it's a lot to say. Tampa has been able to get some wide receivers in the later rounds over the last few years that I'm kind of liking what their front office is doing and just getting that talent late. Double stacking on corners. It's there. I don't know what this team looks like next year, but I liked their draft. The Broncos 2025 draft is a little bit more controversial. This is the team that finished with the first seed in the AFC, and I think they only really had one true contributor from this draft class for the entire year, in RJ Harvey. Backup running back, got you 500 yards on the ground, 7 touchdowns on the ground, 5 receiving touchdowns, 350 yards receiving. I think he's a really good back that gives you some flexibility going forward there with Dobbins being older, having some injury issues, and you could probably target another running back to help with this tandem. Harvey had some real flashes in year 1 that I liked a lot. Obviously, they were at pick 20, so they took Jahdae Barron. So with Barron, in year 1, he didn't get on the field right away, which I thought was a little weird, but obviously Jaquan McMillan was really flashing as a true nickel, and that's what Jahdae Barron was most likely going to play at the NFL level. Having Riley Moss and obviously Patrick Surtain on the outsides limits what you can do with him on the field. It was a weird pick for what they needed from him in year 1, which wasn't much, but I'm excited to see what he can be going into year 2, especially with McMillan probably going to a different team. Pat Bryant, a pick that was kind of criticized from the 3rd round for the Broncos that I think actually fit well with what Sean Payton was doing. Obviously not going to be a wide receiver 1 or 2, but a guy that's just a playmaker in a Sean Payton system that likes to just have guys on the field that can do just enough that Sean Payton can get them open quickly. The Steelers had pick 21 and they took Derek Harmon. I loved this pick because I love Harmon. I think he has the potential to be a really good defensive tackle at the NFL level and makes Pittsburgh more physical and adds more talent to a defensive line with veterans that are getting older and slightly regressing. In round 3, they went with Caleb Johnson with their 2nd pick, and in year 1, there were a lot of concerns. I think the truth about Caleb Johnson is we never really got to see what he could be in year 1 because he wasn't really given the opportunity to. We don't really see these guys really take off until they start reaching that 70, 80 attempt count for rushing. And he only got 29 on the year. I think he was a really, really, really hard back to grade in year 1 because he wasn't given the opportunity. But you can also say he struggled with the opportunities he was given in year 1. Jack Sawyer showed a little bit more than people were expecting. Pick 123, he comes in and actually gets a few sacks, was a legitimate pass rusher for Pittsburgh in year 1. I think he was fine for a 4th round pick. Will Howard, I don't know if they ever play him, but I'm still excited to see if he can be at least something at the NFL level. The thing with Pittsburgh is that this is a team that rarely keeps 1st round picks over the last 10 years past their first contract. The only one that has really done it is TJ Watt. So I think Derek Harmon is a good first step because he has the potential to finally be that real Pittsburgh guy that can get a contract past his first contract from Pittsburgh. The Chargers had pick 22, and they took Amarian Hampton. It was surprising. They had just signed Najee Harris, and later on, it's revealed that Kamani Vidal is actually a really good running back and maybe worthy of the starting job in LA. I think Amarian Hampton can still be a really good running back. He had some growing pains in year 1. He only played 9 games. He was limited. I mean, didn't average much yards per carry, 545 yards in the year, but only in 9 games. I think there's room to grow. They have to really improve the run blocking for him to fully show what he could be, but I understand why they went with that decision, and it actually worked out in hindsight considering the fact that Vidal might be a free agent, but also Najee Harris messed up his eye, then tore his Achilles when he came back from that eye injury. Trey Harris in the 2nd round, I thought was an okay pick, and he was a fine playmaker for them in year 1. I think all their playmakers didn't play the level you'd want. Outside of Oronde Gadsden in the 5th round was a beautiful pick for them that really worked out, giving them 3 touchdowns and 664 yards on 49 receptions. He immediately became one of the most trusted options for Justin Herbert in a really, really difficult season. I think there's room to grow for this entire draft class, but Gadsden in the 5th round, Hampton in the 1st round, you got playmakers. You just need to fix the O-line. The Packers went against their usual selves and finally picked a receiver at pick 23 in Matthew Golden. And in year 1, it wasn't great. He didn't score a touchdown throughout the entirety of the regular season, ended with 361 yards. It wasn't perfect. But if you look at the advanced stats, if you look at the numbers and you watch the tape, you notice something. Matthew Golden is a good receiver in an offense that is filled with playmakers that loves to pass the ball around. It's different. It's weird. And it doesn't allow a guy to really take over as a wide receiver 1. But I think in a bigger role next year with Romeo Doubs being in free agency and hopefully everyone being healthy, at least with Matthew Golden, he can really take off into being at least a wide receiver 2, a top wide receiver 2 in the league, maybe even a wide receiver 1. I don't know if he jumps to 1,000 yards in year 2, but I think there's real potential for him to continue growing and climbing and climbing. This is a guy that popped up late in his college career, especially in that last season as he really took off in the college football playoffs. But I saw the potential, and you saw it in that playoff game against the Bears. Anthony Belton in the 2nd round, giving them some flexibility for tackle with some guys going into free agency in 2025. Belton had some issues in year 1 when he played and thrust into a guard role during Thanksgiving. But I still kind of like this pick. Savion Williams, someone that I thought Matt LaFleur was going to get creative with. They didn't give him many opportunities, and he really couldn't make the best of most opportunities in year 1. But I still like the pick. I understand this isn't one of the best drafts in the world. NFL.com actually ranks this as the worst draft. I just saw that when I searched up Green Bay Packers draft. But I don't hate this draft. It just needs time to grow. And it was to help Green Bay adjust with some guys possibly leaving in free agency and to get better at positions they need to get better at immediately. Minnesota had pick 24 and they went with Donovan Jackson. I think it was a good pick to make considering the interior offensive line regression or issues they had in 2024. They went out in free agency and got Ryan Kelly and Will Freeze, and the last piece they needed was left guard, Donovan Jackson, who had an unreal year at Ohio State, transitioning from guard to tackle and still holding up really, really well. In 14 games, he had growing pains for sure, had a hand injury that really limited him in the early part of the year. But I still think Jackson could really be a guard of the future for Minnesota, considering their free agent signings had all those injury issues and didn't work out really well. I think Jackson is a real key piece next to Darrisaw in the long term. Minnesota has some real issues with their roster. They just fired their GM. There's so many questions with their quarterback. But Jackson, I don't think is a question. The rest of their draft, not great. They had only 5 picks total. They didn't have a 2nd rounder. They didn't have a 4th rounder. And with their 3rd rounder, they took Ty Felton. He only had 3 receptions on the year. It's not a great rookie season for a wide receiver to have only 3 receptions being picked in the 3rd round. I need to see some growth from their later round picks for me to be more confident in this draft, but I like Donovan Jackson. Now we skip from pick 24 to 27, the Ravens. We're obviously skipping Falcons and Giants picks. Talked about that already. Anyways, the Ravens picked Malachi Starks at pick 27, and I really did like the pick. They needed more at safety to allow Kyle Hamilton to move back to the nickel where he shined. If Kyle Hamilton wanted to be in the strong safety, I still think Malachi Starks would have been amazing at free safety, which I think he was really good in year 1. I think there's still room to grow. I still think there's things that he needs to work on. I think he needs to be better in coverage in the long term. But I think that in year 1, you saw things right away that you like from a rookie safety. It's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect. And that's totally okay. I think in year 1 for Mike Green, he wasn't great. Taking the risk that they did, considering what they were already dealing with PR-wise, I think at the end just wasn't worth it. I'll never be the biggest fan of that pick. Let's just be honest. Anyways, I think he still has room to grow. He was very much relying on just the same few moves that he used in college that he got away with. And it's going to take time for a guy from Marshall to grow at the NFL level. Emory Jones didn't get much action or playing time in year 1 with a team that really struggled in the interior offensive line. But when he did, I think there was real flashes there of someone that could be a good guard for this team in the future. And they need it. Teddy Buchanan in year 1 immediately showed real potential at a linebacker position that they really needed help at. Trenton Simpson has not developed very well at all. Roquan Smith is declining, and Buchanan immediately came in and was pretty good. I think with Buchanan, the issue is he tore his ACL in December, and that is 100% concerning and something you got to worry about going forward. Tyler Loop in the 6th round, mostly good and consistent for the entire year. It's just that last play of the year that you got to remember and sting with forever. Detroit at pick 28 decided to go with Tyleik Williams, and they actually hit the trenches in both of their first 2 picks, something that a lot of people are expecting them to do again in 2026. With Williams and their second round pick in Tate Rutledge, they both had growing pains. They both struggled early in the year, and I think they both really picked up their footing towards the end of the year. With Williams, they need premium talent in their interior defensive line. Aleem McNeil got this big extension. He was one of the worst defensive tackles in football in 2025. DJ Reader is a free agent. He is in his 30s, and Detroit is tight on money. They might not be able to bring him back on a 1-year deal like they have before. They need Tyleik Williams to continue to progress, and I think you'll see that going into year 2. I think there's real potential for Tyleik Williams to really take over that interior defensive line and be something serious in the long term. This is him and Terry Arnold, the first 2 Detroit picks since Dan Campbell got there, that they haven't gotten something from right away. But I think it's okay with Williams because he showed more in the full-length season and played all 17 games. Rutledge gives them some flexibility with their interior offensive line going into next year, maybe moves to center with Glass now possibly retiring. I still like that pick. To Slaw, 6 touchdowns on 16 catches. Made some of the craziest catches you'll see in your life. It's just there needs to be more growth, more consistency there going into 2026 where he can get open more often as a wide receiver 3 for this team. Their later round picks didn't make much of an impact. I think Miles Frazier could be an interesting option for them at guard going into next year. Maybe could compete with Christian Mahogany. We'll see. But I like this draft class dealing with their immediate needs. Trenches and some more wide receiver playmaking. At positions they've been rotating in free agency with the money they've had with their guys being so young over the last few years, as they've rotated veteran guards, defensive tackles, and wide receivers. Dealing with all 3 right away, I think was a smart thing to do considering where this team is ending up going into the late 2020s. The Commanders at 29 took Josh Conerly, and this draft class, they only had 5 picks, similarly to the Vikings, a team that also regressed from 2024. I think a large part of it is they weren't able to bring in as much young talent as they were able to in the 2024 draft, where they had like 11 picks. With Josh Conerly, I think a lot of people were critical of the pick because why do you keep investing in offensive line? You just traded for Tunzel. You also are reaching on this guy a little bit. He's more looked at now as a 2nd round pick, maybe not even the guy for you. You're moving him to right tackle, and he struggled early, even more criticism for him. But I really liked it in terms of they need young talent everywhere, and talent in the trenches is totally fine. And he actually got better as the year progressed. I liked how Conerly finished the year. He wasn't perfect. No one's perfect, but I think it's a waiting game with him. Trey Amos only played 10 games, and they needed help at corner. It wasn't perfect again. I think he needs to continue to grow there. Jalen Lane, fine in year 1, also was just in a weird situation. Ja'Cory Croskett-Merritt, a lot of people were excited about, immediately goes in the year and just flashes with 800 yards on the year total, 8 rushing touchdowns. I think with Croskett-Merritt, he is one of those guys that you don't know if he's like a long-term NFL guy or a guy that immediately goes in the league, flashes, and then just burns out of the league. That's typically how these later round pick running backs go, that flash early. And with how the Commanders treated him, that might be a situation with him. I don't want to predict someone's NFL career ends early, but he isn't in the best situation right now to be the starter going into next year and was not viewed favorably for most of that season. With Buffalo at pick 30, I was kind of left frustrated with their approach. Maxwell Hairston had real concerns going into the NFL draft and was viewed as a guy that could easily slip in a later round 2, and they went with him in the 1st round. I think Hairston had some flashes when he played, started 3 games, played 11, but dealt with injuries for most of the year, and is a guy that I'm kind of all over the place with going into next year, specifically with things he did outside of football. TJ Sanders at pick 41. I know Buffalo fans are very critical of this pick considering how it played out. Played 12 games, only had 2 starts. They needed help in the interior right away, and he did not offer that. Landon Jackson, pick 72, actually also really struggled early and then also had some injuries and only played 3 games in the year. But in the later rounds, I think they did get some production at least. Deion Walker was a really, really interesting player for me because the guy is massive. And he showed in 2023 during that season that there is something there with this kid for a guy that is so massive, that is so enticing. In 2024, he fell down back to earth, struggled in his final year at Kentucky, goes in the draft and falls to the 4th round. But Deion Walker was actually one of the highlights for the Bills defense this past year. Started 16 games, really helped the run defense, even if it was bad for most of the year, came in and actually showed real production. Jackson Hawes in the 5th round added to their tight end depth, gives them some flexibility if they want to move on from Dalton Kincaid or Dawson Knox in the future, not Dalton Kincaid, former first-round pick. Started 8 games and actually helped Josh Allen in the red zone a bit. Again, walking out of this draft class, I'm not the most confident in this team having security on a 4th-round defensive tackle and a 5th-round tight end. It's great that these two flash right away because these are 2 hard positions to play as rookies. But again, Maxwell Hairston and TJ Sanders needed to show more for me to be confident in this team and this front office that's now being promoted. For Philadelphia at 31, I loved Jahad Campbell. I thought it was an interesting pick for a team that really learned their lesson with undervaluing linebacker in 2023. They got Zach Bond, who was immediately an All-Pro, and then decided, let's double this up. Let's go get Jahad Campbell. Nakobe Dean has some injury issues. He's a free agent the following offseason. And Jahad Campbell is a really raw and young prospect. I am really excited to see how he grows in year 2 with a better opportunity with Nakobe Dean now going into free agency. Reed Blankenship was also a free agent. So Andrew Makuba will probably ascend to that role. Makuba in their 2nd round, I loved the pick. I really did. One of my best friends goes to UT and we'd watch those games together and always scream Makuba. Makuba allows Philly to get more creative with their defense and also allows Cooper DeJean and Kenyon Mitchell to just have more fun. They have gotten so young in their secondary in just 2 years and their linebacker core. This is why this team is so consistent and one of the few teams that consistently is the top of the conversation in the NFL, no matter the year. And I think in their later rounds, you need to see more from what they had. I mean, they really drafted for depth and preparing for guys potentially leaving free agency, guys retiring. I mean, Drew Kendall in the 5th round, Small London Jr. in the 5th round, Mac Williams in the 5th round, Ty Robinson in the 4th round. This is for if they can't pay certain guys are getting older. Cameron Williams just taking a hit in the 6th round, a guy that has massive size and also has kind of potential there, in my opinion, if they wanted to coach him up. I know that their offensive line coach is gone, but I love this Philly draft and still feel confident that Philly's doing the right things when it comes to drafting. Our final 1st-round pick we look at is Kansas City, a team coming off a serious Super Bowl loss where they really struggled on their offensive line. They went and picked Josh Simmons at the end of the 1st round. Coming off a patellar injury, there was so much concern there. But Simmons immediately came in and was established as a guy that could be the left tackle of the future for Patrick Mahomes. Get really young in the offensive line, finally have some real security there after the Tampa loss, rotating in some older guys, and also really hitting on later round picks in Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith. Josh Simmons felt like the final piece, and Kinsley Sutamata moving to left guard. He only played 8 games. He was knocked out for the year after a wrist injury with Kareem Hunt chip blocking and messing up his wrist. It's a weird incident, but I still am confident in him. The Chiefs, like usual over the last few years, struggled after that. I think Omar Norman-Lott, Ashton Gilliette, drafting them to really help their trenches, they couldn't stay healthy or they couldn't be on the field. Norman-Lott was limited to just 5 games on the year. They needed help there immediately, and they didn't get it. Ashton Gilliette played 17 games, but really wasn't involved. Jeffrey Bossa in the 5th round, I really thought was going to get real playing time, but they did not trust him to do that over Nick Bolton, which is telling how bad Bolton has become. Noah Williams had some injuries and also struggled with playing time, but I still think there's something there. Jalen Royals didn't get on the field at all. They acted like this is just a redshirt year for him. Weird approach. If you can tell, I am not the biggest fan of Kansas City's coaching staff and front office approach over the last few years. But I think Noah Williams, Josh Simmons, Bossa was real talent they got out of this draft. Even Norman-Lott. It's just they needed more if they wanted to get in a real conversation. And it's a reason why they only won 6 games in 2025. I also have to do the 2 teams that traded out of their 1st-round picks with the Texans and the Rams. With the Texans, I think they really focused on trying to get real playmakers for C.J. Stroud. And Jaden Higgins, Ariante Arcega isn't a playmaker, Woody Marks, Jalen Noel. I liked that draft. I think Noel has the potential to step in and be a real wide receiver 3 for this core going forward, with Higgins being the wide receiver 2, with both of them also having real chemistry from their time together in college. Ursaray, being a legitimate left tackle towards that end stretch of the year, was a lot for this team. There weren't questions about Ursaray by the time the end of the year came. The beginning of the year, yeah, it's hard to transition to left tackle. It just is. But Ursaray at pick 48, they got a guy that I think they can be confident with at left tackle going forward. There's talks of them maybe taking another tackle in next year's draft, but I think this is the team that needs to take interior more than anything else. Woody Marks, also a guy that had 700 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, 3 receiving touchdowns, and 208 receiving yards in a season where he started as the backup running back for a large part of it. Immediately came in that Texans Monday Night Football game, or Bucks Monday Night Football game, and showed why he was a guy that this team trusted to trade up for, real third-round picks to trade up for at the beginning of the 4th round. I like what Marks has and like what his potential shows. Jalen Smith, a rotational corner they got in the 3rd round, I want to see more out of, but I like this team's draft because what it gave them right away. They need more offensive line-wise. There's still questions about CJ Stroud, but this was a good draft considering the amount of young, established talent they immediately got. Our final team is the Rams, who will have so much more picks in 2026, considering they traded out of the 1st round in 2025. I think with the Rams, you have to look at what they did as a whole. I didn't love the Terrence Ferguson pick, and I understood why they did it, though. It was to get beefier in the offensive personnel, to allow them to have multiple tight ends on the field to deal with defenses like a Mike McDonald. It is not a perfect pick, and he did not translate very well right away. Halfway through the year, they were talking about ways they needed to get him more involved. But 3 touchdowns, 11 receptions, and 231 yards as a tight end 2 to 3 for most of the year, I think is fine. It was a weird role. I think he'll grow. Josiah Stewart led rookies in pass rush win rate for the entire season at 15%. Pick 90 doing that is awesome. They immediately got another big pass rush guy in the later rounds to continue to add to their defensive line that already has so much talent. Jacquez Hunter, I want to see more of going forward, but running back 3 that only played 5 games, you're not going to see much. Ty Hamilton, think he can still provide something in the interior. Chris Paul, I was surprised they cut him considering the linebacker needs I thought they had going into the year. I want to see more from Terrence Ferguson, but I still think this draft class gave him enough to actually have an MVP this year while also making the NFC Championship. It's hard to replicate things from a season-by-season basis, but I liked what the Rams did for this season. Now, looking at my favorite drafts, I think Seattle has to be mentioned first. Schneider, their GM, admittedly has been undervaluing interior offensive line for a long time. And I bet 2024 was extremely humbling for him. And it made him be honest. He needed to do it, and he did it. The fan base was screaming for 2 players, and those 2 players immediately made contributions to help this team win a Super Bowl at nickel and at guard. I think Elijah Oro needs to continue to grow. Riley Mills had a sack in the Super Bowl. I loved Torrey Horton when he played. Wasn't the biggest fan of the pick, and I was immediately proven wrong. Someone told me I need to go back and look at how Horton played at Colorado State. And when I went back and looked, I was like, there's something there, but I didn't know. And I drafted on my fantasy team and immediately got a guy that was giving me touchdowns like crazy. And I just really loved Seattle's draft. The Browns draft also is one that can't go unnoticed. There are so many problems with what Cleveland has done over the last few years and have put themselves in a serious position where they have to rebuild an entire offense. And it's ugly. But they walked out of 2025 with a starting running back, a legitimate 3-tech, defensive rookie of the year linebacker, a tight end in the 3rd round that immediately had 700 yards. I like what they did. And in undrafted free agency, they got a good wide receiver, or a decent wide receiver, and another running back to continue to add to Dylan Sampson and Quinshon Judkins. There is room for growth for this entire class. When you walk out of year 1, you're excited to see what this team can really do going forward. And Judkins' injury isn't the end of the world because the timetable actually sounds a lot better than what people were thinking. I think the Chargers one's also one I have to mention. There's so many issues with that interior offensive line, but I think out of this draft, they got a real running back that I actually am excited about and dealt with a lot in year 1 and still overcame a lot, had one of the highest missed tackle rates in the NFL, got a decent wide receiver to add to their core. They got a legit starting tight end for the first time in Justin Herbert's career and added real defensive players that I didn't even mention in my Chargers part in the later rounds in RJ Mickens and Jamari Caldwell. There's real talent this team added that makes me excited for what they can do if they really fix their offensive line. My final one will be one I did in part 1 with the Saints because it proved me wrong. I think with the Saints, they really hit in this draft for the first time in a while, getting like fully what they put into it. I think Stutzman and Riley and Neal gave them late round contributions that excite me for what they can do next year. Sanker, Shuck, Banks. I mean, obviously, those 3 really have me excited, especially Shuck and Banks, man. Banks blew me away in year one. And I am so excited to see what stability he provides for this offensive line going forward once they figure out the interior, even without the interior figured out. And then there's Shough, who in 9 starts really showed something that I was not expecting. There's a lot of quarterback evaluations that I do that are wrong immediately. Some that age well, some that I'm fully wrong about forever that I like to stick to. Anthony Richardson, I still believe in. But Shough at pick 40 blew me away in his 9 starts. Okay, so the draft classes that I'm a little bit lower on are ones that I kind of need to see more from. The Jaguars, I specifically mentioned in part 1, how the major turnaround they had was mostly from the roster they had the year before. Rookies did not make much of a contribution to what the Jaguars did in 2025, but I still think that draft class can age much better. I think the Bills draft class, you really got to see more, especially considering the fact that they extended the GM and the draft class. I mean, the only major hit in year one was their 4th round pick. I think Hairston had a decent rookie year. I just think you needed to see more from a 1st round corner, especially considering the last 1st round corner you took. Green Bay, I think you'll see more in year 2 from that draft class than anything else. I know that NFL.com has them ranked as the worst. I don't think that at all. I think that with the other draft classes that didn't have as much picks were ones you have to consider lower, like a Vikings, like a Rams, because they didn't get much in those draft classes in general. I think we need to see more from the Bengals draft class. But yeah, I can't walk away feeling like anybody got screwed in this draft. This was a draft that I think a lot of teams at least got someone right away in year 1. Even the draft classes where everyone's already super critical of them. The Bengals, Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter, even though I'm not the highest on them in the world, and I still think Sonny Styles could be a consideration for him, I think both players in year 1 actually grew a lot. I think the Raiders, even with everything that went wrong with their draft class, I still think the potential that we saw there could at least grow in terms of Jack Beck, Rodgers, Grant, and Darian Porter. Still kind of out on Dante Thornton Jr., but I still think that there was tools there for me to like and for people to like that he could tap into in the long term. All right, so that's our revisit to the 2025 NFL Draft. I'll probably talk about it again in a future video in a year or two, but I actually am really impressed with how this draft class performed in year 1, considering how low I was on it early in the last draft season. I think once we got closer to the draft, I was higher on it. I thought this draft is really deep. It wasn't top heavy. Similarly to the 2026 draft class, I think you're going to get some talent in later rounds that will surprise you in year 1. And there isn't a major blue chip prospect, even compared to last year's draft class. I'm finishing this up as the combine's going on right now. I actually had most of it recorded weeks before then, but yeah, wanted to take my time with this. I hope y'all enjoyed this. Let me know if I missed somebody. Let me know if I graded a draft class poorly or talked about a draft class poorly, if I missed a point, because I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. I actually have changed my opinion so much of this draft class a year after they've been drafted. And I mean, man, I love the NFL draft. Anyways, this is Son of a Sports. I'll catch y'all next time.